Hello friends, welcome to World Maker Books. I am Joy, and we are going to continue with the reading of Black and White. Today is chapters 12, 13, and 14. One note before we start. It's been taking a ridiculous amount of time to edit these the way I've been doing it, so I'm going to try and edit it somewhat less. So there may be more breathing sounds, things like that. The occasional clink of a coffee mug even maybe, although I doubt that. But, it's just taken up, 3 hours or 4 hours to edit a half-hour to 45-minute video. So, we're going to do a little less of that. All right, here we go. Chapter 12, Second Octal, Hyperspace, December 5th, 2037. It turned out getting onto the Behemoth was simply a matter of asking. All docked non-Merc ships were allowed free access to the ship's various common areas. Since it was 1.5 kilometers across, those common areas were enormous. Terry was able to read up a bit on Second Octal specifically. Its crew was listed as approximately 4,000 and mostly Maquis. While he'd seen Maquis on Earth, they were a race he wasn't familiar with, so he looked them up before bed. They'd reminded him of monkeys when he'd first seen them back home. Now, as he looked at the Galnet images, they were more like lemurs, only these were much bigger, though somewhat smaller than humans, had split tails, and were also a Merc race. I wonder what they're doing running big space freighters, he had wondered before drifting off to sleep. You guys ready for a day on the town? Doc asked at Teddy Roosevelt's airlock. Town? Terry asked. Yes, these behemoths are small cities in space, he said. I might have slipped over last night for a couple hours just to look around. You know the crew are Maquis and they're Mercs, Terry asked. Doc gave him the appraising look again. Mercs? His mom asked, looking at Terry in alarm. I knew they were a Merc race, Doc replied. I've been shot at by them a couple of times. However, the Maquis aren't like some Merc races. What do you mean? She asked. Well, they're more like us. She had her slate out and was looking at the Galnet image of a Maquis. Doesn't look a lot like us, she said, more like a monkey. Lemur, Terry corrected. His mom rolled her eyes. Same thing. I didn't say they looked like us, just that their societal structure is more like ours and less like other Merc races. They'd climbed into the ring hallway around Second Octal, where all the ships were docked. This time there were others there. Terry listened to Doc with half his attention as he looked at the aliens. The Maquis society isn't built around Mercs like the Tortantula or the Minshaw. I know what the Minshaw are, she said. Terry glanced at Doc, who winked at him. What are Tortantula? Giant 10-legged spiders with a gun-wielding chipmunk on their backs, Terry said. She gasped. Close enough, Doc said. The point is, their societies are completely structured around a Merc life. If you aren't a Merc, you work to support them. Your race gains almost all its income from Mercs, and if you aren't one, you're a second-class citizen or worse. How are the Maquis different? Terry asked, also curious. A bunch of lizards, more like snakes but with 6 legs, motivating by. Behind them were tall, humanoid aliens with water-filled helmets he immediately recognized as Selroth, like the ones on Pegasus. I don't exactly know, Doc admitted. Only that they're a race big into starships, both military and transports. They make warships, too, as well as operate Merc space navies. Do they make these? He asked. I don't think so, Doc said. I don't think anyone's made these for eons. Terry looked around as they approached the lift from the other day. The ship looked worn, certainly. However, it didn't look as old as it was supposed to be. How could a ship operate for thousands of years? More, tens of thousands of years. Then where did they get them? Terry asked. Doc shrugged and punched a code into the lift's control panel. It flashed blue. Terry had begun to learn color coding wasn't the same as Earth in many places. Lots of races used blue as an okay color and green as bad. Doc had said once it was because not all aliens bled red blood, many were green. He guessed it made sense. The lift opened, and Doc put out a hand to delay Terry. He wondered why, but then a massive, brightly purple bulk moved out of the elevator. The Ugar's beady black eyes regarded the much smaller humans as it shambled out. It roared, which made his mom squeak in surprise. Greetings, their translators said. Doc touched his translator and replied. Greetings, he said in reply. Satisfied, the Ugar shambled off. I'd hate to hear it angry, his mom said. It doesn't sound a lot different, Doc said. I met a guy who said the Ugar don't have an indoor voice. Chuckling, the 3 entered the lift. It had probably been a bit crowded with a single Ugar. It fit all 3 of them handily. Terry tapped the controls, and the doors closed. They kind of smell, Terry said. I bet we don't smell good to them either, his mom said. Doc nodded in agreement. It seemed like a foreign concept to him until he thought about it. What would the Ugar think of humans? Hairless monkeys from a backwater world? Ugar were mercs, but had the Ugar been a merc itself? Did it even know they were human? Every day he spent out in the galaxy, Terry felt like his perceptions were being altered. No, he thought, not altered, improved. He was about to tell Doc when the lift slowed to a stop. He noticed immediately they were lighter than before. It was similar to what he'd heard the moon was like, a sixth of a G. The doors opened, and they shuffle-stepped out. Months of living in space had made his reflexes as flexible as his mind was becoming. If you lived in space, you adapted to varying gravity quickly, or got used to bruises. He didn't like bruises, so he worked hard to adjust quickly. The lift doors opened. Terry expected to see a corridor like on Karma Station, maybe a wide promenade. Instead, it was more like the inside of a shopping mall. The area was curved and reminded Terry of a sports stadium. There were aliens everywhere he looked. He'd been expecting mostly McKee, but there were hardly any in sight. As they moved into the open, there was a large interactive Tri-V. It would have been called an information kiosk in older times. Here it was part display, part directory, and part advertisement. Terry couldn't put his finger on what the place felt like. His mother did it for him. "It's like a cruise ship," she said, a laugh in her voice. "Yeah, I suppose so," Doc agreed. "These behemoths make a lot of their money carrying other ships from system to system. I guess they also make money off the ship's passengers." They quickly learned the area was called the Pavilion by their translators. Terry recalled how the translators worked with a matrix of meanings and only assigned a word if the context was closer. He would have called it a mall. The space was organized into levels, each one providing different products and services. On the bottom floor where they entered were mostly ship's services and the most McKee. The busiest was the ship's purser's office, which handled the contracts of carriage between Second Octal and all ships docked for transit. Terry found out the purser also managed the ship's accounts in relation to cargo and any inside passengers. The latter turned out to number in the thousands as well. Billions moved around the galaxy on various starships. The cheapest way was via a behemoth. "They're more like balloons than airliners on Earth," Doc said. "You don't tell a behemoth where to go, you just climb on and enjoy the ride." Also on the first deck was a sizable dining galley for passengers. You needed an inside ticket to access it. There was a sizable store where you could buy supplies for your ship as well as passengers, while one more handled booking to extend a trip or arrange future ones. Outside the office was a Tri-V of the galaxy showing hundreds of sparkling yellow dots connected by a vast web of green traces. "I wonder what it's for," Terry wondered. "Those are all our clan ships," a McKee, who was standing nearby, answered. They all turned to look at the alien. "That's a lot of ships," his mom said. Terry nodded. "How many?" Doc asked. "Our clan boasts 122 ships," the McKee said, turning and gesturing at the Tri-V with all the flourish of a ringmaster at the circus. "A full 82 of those are behemoths, like our beautiful Second Octal. Are you interested in booking further passage?" "No, thank you," Doc said, and the McKee bowed before turning away. "Hey," he said suddenly, and the alien turned back. "Your translator has our language?" "We have done business with humans," the alien said. "It is only good business to be prepared for future business." "He thinks we'll be around a long time," Terry said after the McKee left. "Or at least be customers for a long time," Doc pointed out. They moved up to the second level of the pavilion and found it contained a vast number of shops like what Terry had seen on Karma Station. Not quite as diverse, but many products were available, from day-to-day living devices such as cooking or cleaning to electronics. Terry noticed a shop selling slates like the one he'd bought. "Why do you want to go in there?" Doc asked. "You already have a new slate." "I'm curious," he said. The storefront contained a Tri-V customer interface. To his amazement, it automatically changed to English as soon as he got close to it. Excellent. Terry began clicking icons until he found his own model slate, if not a perfect match. He picked it, then gasped at the price. "They want 600 credits for the one I paid $190 for on Karma Station." "Nice markup," Doc said. "I'll say," his mom agreed. "How can they get away with it?" Terry asked. He looked at the description, and sure enough, it was even the same manufacturer. He couldn't read the writing, but he recognized the symbol. "How can they do what?" Doc asked. What's it called? Scalping." "Not really," Doc said. "Scalping is having something somebody else needs and charging through the nose for it because they have no other choice. And before you say anything, we're not in such a case here. You can always wait 6 more days and buy it at our destination. Regardless, though, there's no laws in the Union to stop predatory buying or selling practices." "Then how do they stop it?" Doc laughed. "They don't. How's that fair? It isn't, his mom said. You agree with that? Terry asked her. No, of course not. This is just the world we live in now. Besides, I see Doc's point. If you don't like the price, go somewhere else. You already found your slate for sale at another place. I bet they're available all over the galaxy at vastly different prices. She glanced at Doc and got a nod in agreement. It looks to me like the union depends on competition to keep prices down. You'd be right, Doc said. It doesn't always work, of course. There are some things nobody sells. In which case, the manufacturers suck as much of your blood as they can before giving you the product. But that's not fair, Doc finished for him. I know, kiddo. However, minus a governing body like some agency telling you what you can and cannot manufacture, there's also nothing stopping you from going into business to make the same product cheaper. Terry grumbled. Maybe I'll just hire some mercs to put you out of business. He wasn't expecting the response he got. Now you're thinking the way the union operates. Wait, you mean that happens? You bet, Doc said. That was one of the jobs we did. One company didn't like how another company was trying to take away their business, so they hired us to send a message. What happened? His mom asked. Message delivered, Doc said and winked. Don't look at me. The other guys should have hired some of their own mercs. She shook her head in bewilderment. With things operating the way they seem to, everyone must have to hire mercs to protect themselves. They do, Doc agreed. How sweet it is. Why doesn't a big merc ship come along and attack this one? Terry asked. Ah, Doc said and pointed at him. Now that's an interesting subject. This ship is licensed under the Merchants Guild. Attacking it would probably be a bad idea for the mercs. Without a contract, they'd be pirates, which means they wouldn't be mercs for long. You see, pirates are galactic target practice. Normal ROE doesn't apply. ROE? Terry asked. Rules of engagement. However, I think there have been wars between clans within the Merchants Guild, in which case mercs got involved legally. Everything is so confusing, Terry said, shaking his head. Lots of people think the Galactic Union is a huge free-for-all, kind of like the Old West. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Great Guild sits astride the entire ballgame. The Merc Guild provides firepower and a way to settle the score or get ahead. The Merchants Guild moves stuff around. Mess with them and you could find it hard to get from A to B. The Cartography Guild controls the stargates. Don't pay their fees? You can't even leave the neighborhood. The Trade Guild manufactures things. Upset their apple cart and you might find nobody will sell you new equipment. The Information Guild maintains the GalNet and keeps data flowing around the galaxy. Piss them off and your slate could find its data gone. Then we get to the syndicates, who operate under various guild licenses. Okay, Terry said, holding up his hands in surrender. Damn, Doc, where did you learn all this? Out in the galaxy, the man said and waved his hands in an expansive gesture. That's why I agreed to teach the class. Being a merc and surviving means a lot more than just killing aliens and getting paid. If you jump on a starship and go to another part of the galaxy, you damn better know a bit about how things work beyond the barrel of your gun. He got quiet for a bit. I hope they found someone good to teach the class after I left. I'm sure they did, Terry's mom said, and put a hand on Doc's muscular arm. The man smiled at her in a way that made Terry happy, while at the same time he missed his dad. Everything was so damned complicated. I still think the price is nuts, Terry said, looking at the display. Price too high? The store's computer asked in English. How about this? The price changed to 500 credits. See, Doc said, and winked at him. How many stores back in Molokai would cut you a 20% discount just because you said their stuff was too expensive? None, Terry admitted. They walked away, but he could hear the computer calling after him asking if $4.50 was a better price. Strange world I live in, he thought. The next level up was designed for the convenience of the passengers, both on and off the ship. Various robotic vendors offered food, drink, and entertainment. There wasn't an awful lot of entertainment they found interesting. There were a dozen Tri-V galleries, though. Terry had heard about them on Karma Station. A Tri-V gallery was a big room with dozens of Tri-V projectors. The floors were covered in millions of tiny ball bearings, which could be moved in any direction to simulate walking without moving. The floor could also raise and lower as you walked. The effect was the most immersive virtual reality imaginable. At least the vendors claimed it was. No humans took advantage of them because they needed to be programmed for a human. They found a food vendor whose kiosk responded in English when they approached. The selections were limited. However, they offered various juices and, amazingly, applesauce. Real applesauce? His mom asked. Yeah, looks like it, Doc said. Then he pointed. They have corn, too. Why would they have fruit juices, applesauce, and corn? Terry wondered. Merchant ships make a lot of their money speculating, Doc explained. They'll buy something in one star system on the gamble somebody else will pay more for it than they paid. He touched the icons and grimaced. Yeah, they're winning on this one. Terry leaned in to read. The fruit juice was 10 credits a liter, the applesauce 25 credits a liter, and the corn 5 credits a half kilogram. Want $1 million meal? Doc asked. Corn, applesauce, and juice for $1 million? She asked, then laughed. We're not on Earth anymore, he said. Money doesn't work the same, Terry agreed. Doc touched the control on a table with a long bench and ordered some of the juice, 1 liter split between 3 containers. The table opened a box, and 3 plastic glasses with brightly colored fluid inside rose up. Terry took one right away and had a sip. His mom's eyes went wide. Mango, Terry said, and smacked his lips. Ice cold and yummy. I was going to suggest we go carefully, his mom said darkly. They just came from Karma, Doc reminded her. 1 jump from Earth. This is on the trade route. Besides, remember, they knew English. I suspect this clan has traded with humans a few times already. He took a drink of his own juice and nodded. Since they probably paid a credit a ton, profitable transaction, too. Terry's mom looked at the glass for a second, then took a drink, too. Her eyes widened and she moaned. Oh, good, she said. All they'd had on Teddy Roosevelt was powdered drinks. Doc played with the ordering system. In a few seconds, a bowl filled with applesauce rose into view. Everyone laughed when it arrived with straws instead of spoons. When in Rome, Doc said, and took a messy slurp. Soon they were all trying to suck the thick sauce through the straws and laughing uproariously. Terry was glad his mom was having a good time and got an idea. While they ate, he used his slate to access the behemoth's computer. As he'd thought, all the various services they'd found in the pavilion were also available through his computer, including the Tri-V gallery. Doc and his mom were chatting as they enjoyed the applesauce. Neither of them noticed the grin on his face as he worked on his slate. The corn proved more difficult. Doc was sure it would be raw, and even if it were sweet corn, it wouldn't be too tasty. So he dug into the ordering system and found a way to get it cooked. Terry helped by telling him how long it needed to cook and at what temperature, then had to convert the temperature into Kelvin so the alien auto chef understood. Add some salt, his mom suggested as Doc was finishing. Good idea, Doc said, and found sodium chloride as an option, adding 5 grams to the order during cooking. Then he also remembered something other than straws to eat it with. They waited for a couple minutes while it cooked, not knowing what to expect. Then the little door opened, and a dish piled with steaming corn rose up. The smell was fantastic. Doc picked up one of the spoons, more like a plastic dugout really, and scooped up some. Here's mud in your eye. He blew on it, popped it into his mouth, and cautiously chewed. He said. Well, Terry's mom demanded. Doc's serious face cracked into a wide grin. It's sweet corn, he said, and perfect. Terry and his mom dug in with a vengeance. It only took them a couple of minutes to devour the corn. Doc ordered more. At the same time, he found something else and ordered it. What's that? She asked. He held up a finger for patience. She made a face, but waited. Eventually, the door opened, and another tray came up. This time, it had a pile of corn and some steaming meat. I didn't see any meat from Earth anywhere on the menu, she said. No, he said, this is Kloop. It's from somewhere out there. My crew and I had it on a contract a while back. Tastes a little like chicken. The meat had a slight tint of orange and smelled a little like cooked tomatoes. Both Terry and his mom gave him a dubious look. Oh, good Lord, he said, and speared a piece with the plastic skewer the meat came with. He blew on it and popped it into his mouth, chewing busily. Okay? Good enough for me, Terry said, and got his own piece. It did taste kind of like chicken, with a slightly unusual sweet quality about it. Before long, his mom gave it a try, eventually pronouncing it satisfactory. As the 2 grown-ups were finishing off the last of the fruit juice, Terry looked up the Kloop on his slate. It was from the far side of the galaxy. It would take months to get there, probably, and then get back. The thing looked like it was half worm and half squid. Yuck! They looked around for a bit longer before heading back. Terry glanced at his watch and saw he needed to hurry to take care of Pokale's feeding. The Orca just got hungrier and hungrier as he grew. But as they left Second Octal and entered their ship again, he got a second to dock where his mom couldn't hear. Kloop comes from halfway across the galaxy, he said. How did you get a chance to try it before? I lied, Doc said, and winked. Terry gawked. You two were being such candy asses, I had to say something. You could have poisoned us, Terry said. Nah, Doc said. If you look closely, the auto chef had human digestive requirements programmed. The meat was compatible. It could have been wrong, Terry mused. Yeah, maybe, but sometimes you have to take a chance in life, or what fun is it? Chapter 13, Teddy Roosevelt. Hyperspace, December 11th, 2037. As it had in Karma, life fell into a routine in hyperspace. The spin provided by Second Octal made some aspects better. The humans didn't have to spend as much time in the gym, exercising and taking special medications to avoid losing bone density. Care for the drugged orcas was handled by the trained medical staff. However, the strange orientation of the ship made many routine tasks twice as difficult. This included a slew of water circulation and filtration pump failures on Teddy Roosevelt. The malfunctions became enough of a problem that the biologists considered moving the cetaceans to one of the other ships. As a last-ditch effort, a small engineering team was hired from Second Octal to look at the problem. 6 Maquis showed up one morning, all with toolkits and various diagnostic instruments. They examined the human-made ship's systems for an hour. Much yipping and chittering followed. Terry watched and was curious, as his translator didn't want to render what they were saying into English. After a time, they began making modifications. The engineer on Teddy was alarmed when one of the aliens simply cut a power circuit and all 3 pumps went down. However, a second later, a new controller they'd built on the spot was installed, and the pumps came back online. The charge is 300 credits, the leader said, the translator understanding it. What if there are problems later? The engineer asked. The alien smiled. There will not be. Terry's mom paid the bill, and true to their word, no more malfunctions occurred. I wonder why we couldn't understand them, Terry asked her. I don't know, she said. He did some of his own research. The only thing he found was about the Maquis merchant clans. An entry in the Galnet mentioned clans appeared to have individual languages which didn't fit any of the translation matrices. To further complicate matters, the Maquis could produce varying tonal modulations in their vocal cords, which in turn meant they were able to alter the frequency of their speech. They have built-in scramblers, Terry thought. Handy. In what time he could find between lessons, taking care of Pokale, and helping out wherever he could, Terry worked on his pet project. He quickly realized in order to do what he wanted to do, he needed to learn some programming in the Galactic Union's standard computer language. Luckily, it didn't require learning their spoken language. All programming was done in numbers or some special symbol variants. Within a day, he was writing simple programs that could respond to inputs. In 2 days, he was writing fairly complex decision tree routines. After 3 days, he was learning how to integrate human standard image files to Union programs so they could display and encode them in Union formats. On the 4th day, he finally got the program he'd downloaded to do what he wanted it to do, and quickly created his masterpiece. Hey, Mom, he said on the evening of their last day in hyperspace. Yeah, what's up? Can you come with me aboard Second Octal? I have something to show you. Terry, I'm pretty busy. We come out of hyperspace tomorrow and... I know, he interrupted. This is really important. She looked at him and sighed. Okay, but only for a couple of hours. Thanks, Mom. Terry led her out of their ship and into the alien transport, then up to the pavilion. Doc was waiting there. She looked at him in surprise, then at her son. What's going on? The kid is sneaky, Doc said. Come on, you'll want to see this. She looked suspiciously at the hand the man held out, but took it anyway. Terry took her other hand, and they led her upstairs to one of the Tri-V galleries. I thought these didn't work for us, she said. Come on, Terry urged her. The look of suspicion changed to confusion as they walked into the entry area. Terry took a computer chip from his pocket and slid it into the kiosk. It beeped, and a price of 25 credits popped up. He inserted the money, and the doors opened. You may enter, a voice said in English. Welcome, Madison Clark. She looked at Terry in open-mouthed astonishment as they walked in. The floor felt slightly bumpy, but only a little. The lighting was dim, just enough to see there were walls a few dozen meters away, and the room was circular, with a domed ceiling as far away as the walls. What's going to... Whoa! She stopped as the light disappeared, and a complex maze of 3-dimensional grids appeared. It almost instantly resolved into the Kapakahehu beach at sunrise. She gasped. Happy birthday, Mom, Terry whispered. Oh my God, she said. The air was filled with the sound of Pacific Ocean waves lapping up a few meters away. Seagulls cried their mournful wails. There was a hint of salt in the air, and a breeze suddenly wafted across them. Somewhere down the beach, a dog barked and ran into the surf after a frisbee. Terry realized she was crying. Mom, are you okay? She turned to face him, and despite the tears, she looked as happy as he'd seen her in months. I'm fine, she sobbed, and then grabbed him in a rib-creaking hug. How? Your incredibly brilliant son, Doc said. She gestured him over, and he joined the hug. Terry sighed himself. It felt right. After a minute, she let them go and turned around. The cliffs behind them were full of the same expensive houses as before. She took a couple steps, marveling at how the beach felt. I don't understand, she said. This isn't real, of course. No, Terry said. It's just a really impressive Tri-V. Yeah, I understand what you did, but not how you did it. I just figured out how to set it up. Your son is far too modest, Doc said, and put an arm around Terry's shoulder. He learned how the union's image processing software works, adapted it to use our software, and fed in a few thousand primitive human images. A bunch I had from our diving trips, and even a few from publicity shots of Molokai. The alien systems are intuitive, Terry said, and shrugged. It wasn't all that hard. As I said, overly modest. Terry, she said, my brilliant son. You like it, he said, blushing to spite himself. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever gotten for my birthday. She leaned over slightly, not too far because he was getting taller, and kissed him. Thank you. He was smiling so hard his face hurt. His 25 credits bought them an hour in the Tri-V gallery. When the time was running down, the sunset flashed green as a warning. Terry offered to buy another hour. The sun was falling below the horizon and appeared to match the end of the hour. They sat on the edge of the surf. The Tri-V couldn't simulate water. No, she said, this is perfect. As the sun dropped out of sight, Earth faded into fractal patterns and was gone. Perfect, she said. Another tear ran down her cheek. Time to get back to work. As they left, Terry caught Doc's attention. I think I screwed up, he said. No, the man assured him. You freaking nailed it. But she looked so sad. Women's hearts are a deep sea of emotions, he said. Terry looked confused. Don't worry, kiddo. You'll understand one day. Excuse me, a voice said by the door. Terry turned and saw a Maquis waiting patiently. Yes? I am Eskil, Primus of Entertainment on Second Octal. Terry Clark, he said. Dr. Madison Clark, his mom said. Just Doc, Doc said. I viewed a corollary image of your Tri-V program. You guarantee those are private, Terry said, his eyes narrowing. He'd read the contract carefully. As I said, it was a corollary image. All I could see was what was projected, not who was inside. You'll see the contract guarantees the merchant this as a means of protecting against any liability we might incur. What can we do for you, Eskil? His mom asked. The program you wrote is of excellent quality. We've tried to create simulations for your race and have largely failed. Many adjectives were used to describe them, none of them complimentary. I didn't write the program, she said, and touched Terry on the shoulder. My son here did. Son? The alien tried the strange word. Offspring? Close enough, Doc said. I see. Well, even more impressive then. I was wondering if I might have a copy of the program for instructional purposes. Terry was flattered and halfway to saying, sure, why not, when he felt Doc's gentle but firm hand on his shoulder. How much? Doc asked. Sorry? What's it worth to you? It is just a simple program, the Maquis said, effecting a convincing shrug. I merely hoped to see it for some insight. Insight, Doc said, nodding slowly. Sounds like you need a lot of insight if all the humans you tried your programs on thought they sucked. An exaggeration, Eskil complained. No complimentary adjectives, Terry repeated the alien's own words. While Terry was only 12, he was still 5 or 6 centimeters taller than the bipedal Maquis. He rather enjoyed looking down on him. He also now knew from Doc's lead he had something. Like the man said, what's it worth to you? Eskil spluttered, his tiny eyes darting between the 3 humans with what Terry now realized was obvious nervousness. They might be a merc race, but this particular Maquis was no merc. He wondered why the alien hadn't just taken a copy from the computer. In fact, when he'd loaded it, the data was all there. His mind went back to the contract. Of course, it didn't copy the actual program. It merely took the data from the program he'd written on the chip. They wanted the program. I'll offer you a refund on your hour of time and another 100 credits. Eskil tried hard to make it sound like a generous offer. Now, with a good sense of what a credit could buy in space, Terry knew otherwise. I don't think so, he said. It really isn't as important as you think, Eskil said. Terry took out his slate. The alien's eyes widened slightly when he saw it. That's a good model. I know, Terry said, without looking up. He quickly accessed the Galnet info on Maquis and looked up Primus, a senior leader with the Maquis clan, often empowered with financial military power, he read. Aha, gotcha. Not as important. Funny they sent a Primus, then. The alien's eyes darted around as if looking for help. Of course, there were only the 3 humans. Okay, 500 credits. 500, Terry said. The Maquis grinned. 1,000. His voice held a little quaver, and he hoped the alien didn't catch it. Eskil blanched. The fur on this strange split tail stood up on end, and his entire body quivered as if Terry had delivered his offer at the end of a taser. He said several words in his clan's special language before he realized it and switched to one their translators would understand. Ridiculous! Fine, Doc said. Bye. Terry nodded and they headed for the pavilion exit. He was afraid he'd severely overplayed his hand when they got to the bottom floor and halfway across the pavilion. The complex was nearly deserted since they were due to exit hyperspace in a few hours. Eskel's feet made little flapping sounds as he ran up and around them to block the way. Wait, gentle humans. Will you negotiate? The three glanced at each other. Terry looked amused. His mom had a somewhat surprised and amazed expression on her face. Doc smiled like a grinning crocodile. Sure, Terry said. I'll go down to 475,000. The three climbed down from second octal together, the Teddy Roosevelt's crewmen dodging the hatch behind them and sealing the airlock in preparation for undocking. Safely back in their own ship, Terry took out the little fabric bag and opened it. He removed one of the 300,000 credit chits. The red diamond inside was the size of his little fingernail. Each one of them was worth $3 billion on Earth, making the whole pile $9 billion. Did that really just happen? He asked. Yeah, it did, Doc said. I can't believe it, Terry's mom said. Son, you really caught him off guard. You had a great uncle who was a used car salesman. Maybe some of his genes rubbed off on you. Well played, kiddo, Doc said. He removed a pistol from his pocket Terry hadn't even noticed he had. He set the safety back on and made it disappear again. Do you think we were in danger? She asked. Probably not, Doc said. 300K isn't exactly killing money, but the McKee looked like he'd been filleted alive, probably trying to think of how he was going to explain it to his captain and hoping it paid off. He looked at Terry. You might have given him millions of credits in profit, you know. I don't mind, Terry said, holding up one of the chits to see how the ship's light shone through the red diamond. He'd seen red diamonds before. All credits had one. Only the diamond in a 1-credit chip was nothing more than a grain of sand. Even the 1,000-credit chit Doc had given him wasn't more than the size of a grain of rice. The fingernail-sized one seemed enormous, and it really was beautiful in the light. It only took me a few days to code. Terry examined all 3 chits for a moment, then took 2 and handed them to his mom. Terry, why are you giving me these? To help out, he said. No, she said, and tried to hand them back to him. He moved away and held up a hand. Terry, you earned these. And you've worked like crazy for months on end. If this helps us, helps the cetaceans, then that's cool. He held up one and looked at it. I don't know what to do with 100,000 credits. What the heck am I going to do with 300,000? Hire a Merc unit? Doc said with a chuckle. No, you keep it, Mom. If you want, call it one hell of a birthday gift. You're the best birthday gift a mom could ever have, she said, and folded him into her arms. I'll keep it, just in case you change your mind. Terry sighed. In a dingy starship corridor, racing through another dimension, for a minute, he was content. Doc gave him a wink, making Terry smile even bigger. With a credit chit worth $3 billion, he was also the richest human kid in the galaxy. Chapter 14. Teddy Roosevelt, Lupasha System, Koro Region, Tolo Arm, December 12, 2037. Shortly after emerging from hyperspace, Teddy Roosevelt and her 2 accompanying ships were cast free from second octal, one at a time, conveniently hurled in the direction of their destination. As was the way of the behemoths, her arrival was timed so she was coasting toward the Stargate. The orcas were awoken from their chemically induced slumber, and rebreathers were affixed. It was the second time they'd undergone the procedure, and the first time they were ready for it. They came out much less disoriented than the previous time, showing no signs of stress or illness. Moloko reunited with her calf, and all was good. Terry watched their ship detach from the observation dome on Teddy Roosevelt, now configured once again for standard operations. Captain Baker seemed happy her ship was no longer spinning around upside down. Welcome to the Lupasha system, she said. Terry couldn't see much. The star was more orange than Sol was yellow, and it seemed dimmer or smaller. He couldn't make up his mind which. Doesn't look like the kind of place we'd find a world the cetaceans can live on, he remarked. Looks can be deceiving, Doc said as he floated into the observation dome, his mom right behind. You've been here? Captain Baker asked. Doc nodded. Dead end, if you ask me. What's here? Terry asked. Lupasha was supposed to be a massive trade hub, Doc said. The star's an orange dwarf, or K-class, as the astronomers called it. On Earth, astronomers had it tagged as a possible exoplanet system. Terry nodded. We learned about those. We also learned, after we got stellar data from the Union, most of our guesses were less than accurate. Correct, the captain said. There weren't any inhabitable planets here. At least, sort of. She touched a control, and a low-resolution Tri-V came up. Terry saw it was far lower resolution than the miniature one on his slate. Displayed was the Lupasha star system, primary in the center, and planets projecting white rings to show their orbits. There were only 3. The captain continued her description. The planet furthest out is a rock ball, gathered up from the system's Kuiper belt over billions of years. Not much there, and too hard to mine, too unstable. The next is in the middle zone and should have been one of those so-called Goldilocks planets, only it turned out to be a dwarf planet. It does have an oxygen atmosphere, but because Lupacia is so dim, what water it does have is frozen, and there's no active core. She shrugged. Some minerals, but again, not worth it. The surprise turned out to be the last planet closest to the sun. The Tri-V's grainy image centered on a gas giant. It somewhat resembled Jupiter, with numerous titanic gaseous vortexes raging in its atmosphere. It also had a prominent ring like Saturn. It's big, too. A little bigger, and Lupacia might have been a binary system. Instead, we were left with this big-ass gas ball. Like gas giants in Sol, this one has multiple moons. Jupiter has 79, Saturn 53, Uranus 27, and Neptune 13. Some big, some small. Lupacia 1 here only has 11, but one of those 11 proved interesting. She looked at Terry. Did you study Jupiter's moons? Yes, ma'am. Excellent. Can you tell me which one turned out to have life? Trick question, Terry said and smiled. 2 of them did. Ganymede has a strange spongiform life. An exotic, the captain said. Even the Union doesn't understand it. Then you mean Europa, the captain nodded. They're just tiny multicelled organisms and some plants living off the volcanic sulfur vents. Elegant little closed system, Captain Baker agreed. Still, it was life, and it proved you didn't need sunlight for life to evolve. One of the moons here is just like Europa, only larger. The Tri-V view moved to show a white planet in the foreground, the surface a latticework of cracks and impact craters. Data appeared next to the image, showing orbital speed, albedo, gravity, and surface temperature. Surface temp? Terry's mom asked. Yes, Doc said. Insane, she said. Terry examined the display. 52 degrees isn't cold, he said. It's hot. All the adults looked at him with the expressions they used when he'd missed something. What? 52 Kelvin, his mom said. Oh, hell, he said, both amazed and feeling embarrassed. He wasn't sure, but thought 52 Kelvin was around 300 degrees below zero, barely above the temperature of liquid nitrogen. Frozen hell, his mom said. It might be frozen, but it also had potential, Doc said. It all has to do with the Islians. They had an interest in Lupacia 1, the gas giant. It showed potential as a home for them. What race could live on a gas giant? Terry asked. The captain smiled and touched the Tri-V controls. The gas giant was replaced by what Terry thought was a fuzzy image of a Humboldt squid. This is as good an image as we have of them, she explained. Like the life forms on Ganymede, the Islians are exotic. Their life cycle isn't based on carbon like ours. They live inside gas giants and would find our atmosphere just as lethal as we find theirs. The Islians are starship builders, Doc said. Some people say they basically wrote the manual on space combat. They've got huge fleets of ships, shipyards, and industrial operations. This moon was ideal to provide the elements needed to construct some parts of starships, right next door to a gas giant they could live in. So, what happened? Terry's mom asked. I'm getting to that, Doc said. The moon has the same liquid oceans under the ice as Europa, if deeper. They also have a much richer variety of life as well, more than a few surprises. Well, the Islians contracted with the Selroth, who would do the mining of the moon while they built their little colony. The problem arose when the Selroth backed out. They didn't like the chemical composition of the moon's oceans. Apparently, there weren't enough minerals to make it worth it for the Islians to perform remote or robotic mining. They gave up. But not until after they had the Stargate installed, Captain Baker said. Also a space station. She laughed. Must have cost them a fortune. How do we factor in? Terry's mom asked. The Islians still want some of those resources and were willing to pay for a quiet exam. The leasehold is open on the planet Moon, but if they made a big show over interest, it might turn into a contested situation. How do you get these leaseholds? She asked. You can slap down a huge pile of money to the Cartography Guild, fight someone to gain control. Or use the planet to extract a certain amount of resources for a certain period of time without anyone else doing the same thing. Those are pretty vague situations, she said. It can be, Doc agreed. Since this was an established mine at one point, the quantities are established. 20 million kilos of any ore within 5 years, then a 1 million credit fee, or a 5 million credit fee up front. The Islians are nothing if not cheap. They want to go for the mining, so the fee is paid for in profits. You and your men came here to scout, Terry said. Doc nodded. Yes, we did. We built a submersible and went down to recon the mining and habitat facilities for the Islians. After we verified it's all still there, they offered us the contract to prove the claim. If the Selroth couldn't live there, how are we going to? Terry asked. The ocean's chemistry is nearly identical to ours, his mom explained. This also means the cetaceans can live there. Terry nodded in understanding. Now it all made sense. We can too, with some adaptations. Like what? We're still working on it, she said, glancing at Doc. Terry looked at Doc and then his mom. Of course, adults loved keeping secrets from kids. A lot of times it was because they thought kids couldn't handle the truth, which was completely wrong. Ugh. Maybe little kids couldn't. 12 wasn't a little kid. Terry had enough details in the Galnet. He'd get his own answers. We going down there now? We're going to the space station first, Doc said. There we'll be parting company, Captain Baker said. You aren't taking us to the planet? Can't, she said, and shrugged. No way to refuel, so we couldn't get back into space. We're going to hire local talent to get us down to the moon. Does the moon have a name? Terry asked. It did in the Selroth language, Doc said. Sounded like a hiccup underwater. Terry laughed. Tina came up with its new name, Hoarfrost. All right, that is the end of chapters 12, 13, and 14. And we hope you enjoyed listening to Black and White by Mark Wandrey. If you did so, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. If you really liked it, please share with your friends. We could use the help. We'll be back in a few days and with more chapters 15, 16, and 17. And we'll see you then. Thanks. Bye.